Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim has wrapped up a meeting with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence in Washington. He's now in New York. The visit was aimed at repairing ties after a diplomatic dispute last month, which led both sides to temporarily suspend visa services. Well, our correspondent Edis Tianshan is in New York with more on the Turkish Prime Minister's visit. Edis.
Well, Kilmini, the highlight meeting was obviously with the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, after which Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim came right over to New York, and here he met with prominent community members, the Jewish community members, as well as investors right here in this hotel. And afterwards, also on his schedule was another meeting with the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres before he leaves the country on Friday. But as you pointed it out, the main objective here was repairing ties with the United States. And to talk more on that, I'm joined by Brenda Shaffer, who is a foreign policy expert. Was this a successful trip, would you say, in terms of repairing those badly damaged ties right now?
Well, clearly on the interim irritant to the relationships like the visa issue, this visit wouldn't even take place without already agreement on the two sides to get rid of those immediate issues of irritants. But until the wider frame of the relations is repaired, I think we need a much bigger reprioritization of U.S. foreign policy, something that hasn't happened yet in the United States despite the change of the administration, actually almost a year ago.
And some of the concerns they have are actually are beyond international affairs. They're rather domestic judicial affairs. We're also talking about, one court case here in New York regarding a Turkish businessman and a bank official, and another court case in Turkey regarding a diplomatic consul employee, a Turkish employee of the U.S. mission. Do you think these diplomatic efforts will help resolving some of those matters?
Well, actually, I think those issues are quite legal and not diplomatic. And despite the fact that we live in this globalized world where we're sitting here in New York and people in Istanbul and Ankara are watching the TV at the same time, we're reading the same things, we still have misunderstandings, I think, of each other's priorities and how systems work. For instance, extradition, legal proceedings like on sanctions violations, that is a purely legal procedure that is not affected by the White House, by Congress, by the political level, and therefore it should be focused, if you want to address these issues, on the legal issues, the best legal representation, working on extradition processes, and not actually on the diplomatic. And on the flip side, I think Americans often don't understand how difficult the real security situation is in Turkey, surrounding Turkey. I mean, we are probably at the most dangerous situation in the Middle East in 50 years, probably since the 1970s. Superpower confrontation, regional power confrontation, non-state actors. We're playing chess on like a multi-level board, and really, I think still Washington doesn't get how much these issues, whether it's relations with terrorist groups or playing in domestic actors, how serious these issues are for the people of Turkey and for countries around Turkey.
And, speaking of regional security and some of the concerns you just mentioned there, I mean, to be more specific, the U.S. support towards groups like YPG is still a concern, and the Prime Minister said, called on the U.S. officials to when they will actually take those weapons from them. I mean, do you think these calls will get some answers this time? Do you think the relationship is important enough for the United States to actually change their foreign policy regarding the support towards the Kurdish group?
Well, I think the U.S. needs to reprioritize its foreign policy, meaning that for any hope of stability in the Middle East, any hope of some type of some type of safer relationship with Russia, U.S. influence in Eurasia, Southern Europe, there has to be a strong U.S.-Turkey alliance. It's a cornerstone, really, of any of those processes. It's not only essential to the security of Turkey and the security of the United States, but it's essential to all those regions. And once that relationship is back in place, and all those other issues, I think you find a solution to them. But I think it's really important that the sides don't play hardball. For instance, Turkey maybe shouldn't think about buying Russian or Chinese weapons like the S-400 from Russia. You're a NATO member. It's probably not the best thing, even if it's done as some sort of negotiation technique. American side, you probably shouldn't hire in the embassy people that are politically involved in Turkey and potentially in terrorist movements in Turkey, and to be very careful about those issues.
Brenda Shaffer, thank you very much for your insight.